on the back of the Gaza ceasefire vote at the back end of last year, there was real kind of anger at Labour that there was no opposition. It felt as if there was no opposition to what the government was doing. And then, the ceasefire vote was an opportunity for the country to come together and say, look, we wanted a ceasefire, but Labour decided to whip their MPs and abstain. And so on the back of that, it was, well, what the people who actually want a ceasefire, where do they go to? And so there was a real sense of Labour being, Labour losing a lot of the Muslim support. And then obviously at that time, a lot of councillors resigned and became independent, and there was a huge wave. And really, we kind of read the back of that wave to some extent here in Enfield. But we were kind of sheltered by the fact that Kate was a great supporter and did actually vote for the ceasefire. And so we didn't really think much of a challenge, in particular in Edmonton, because Kate was very much pro-Palestinian and a supporter. So we didn't really think about it. But that all changed when she got suspended. And so there was a real fear when she got suspended that she wouldn't be let back into the Labour Party, aka Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott, what we've seen. And so there was a real fear that we would be put up with a Starmer-led candidate in Edmonton, as opposed to someone who was truly on the left wing of the party. And so on the back of that, we started a group called the Enfield Community Action Group, ECAG, and that came into existence like the end of February, start of May. And that group was formed on the back of Kate being suspended and us starting to think about, well, actually, we should actually put people up, against a Starmer-led candidate. Now, because Enfield is very, I call Enfield sleepy politically. It's never really been that politically active, compared to our neighbours, in Tottenham and Haringey. We've just kind of accepted Labour Tory over the years. No one's really kind of come about as a third party challenge, really. The Greens are nowhere, Lib Dems are nowhere, so it really is just two party duopoly. And we really didn't, there's no alternative in terms of who to vote for if Kate wasn't going to stand, and we'd left with a Starmer-led candidate. So we formed this ECAG group to basically raise an independent challenge. And we were going to say, we're going to raise an independent challenge. And if we're going to do it for Edmonton, well, we might as well do it for the other two constituencies as well. Bambos, Labour MP in Old Enfield Southgate, and Ferryhill Clark in Enfield North. So that's how we kind of started. And really we were in the mechanisms of, going through selection of candidates and trying to kind of form a hustings. And then the election came along and Kate got put back. Her suspension was revoked and she was put back. So it put us all in a very, very difficult situation. And we had to make some very difficult decisions in a very quick space of time. So we were all surprised and shocked, really, that Kate was actually brought back into the Labour Party. A lot of us thought that, what we'd seen with Diane Abbott and how that had been, strung out, really, there was really kind of a purge of left-wing socialist MPs within the Labour Party. And so we really didn't anticipate Kate coming back. Now, we wrote, whilst Kate was suspended, I wrote to her as an individual constituent. And then I also wrote to her as founder of ECAG, and both times asked her whether she would consider standing as an independent, given that she was, suspended from the Labour Party. So we actually reached out to her and said, we would back you if you stood as an independent. Both times she came back. There was no response. There's no response from her in terms of those offerings. And she was silent to most of her constituents while she was suspended. So no one really knew what was going on. And then we found the news that she was reinstated. And so it made us it put us in a very difficult position, because we actually support Kate as an individual in terms of the things that she stood for. And when we came to select candidates for the general election, we had candidates for the other two constituencies in Enfield North and in Southgate and Wood Green. But when it came to choosing a candidate for Edmonton and Winchmore Hill, we made a decision as part of the action group to actually meet her. So we made a decision to actually write to her and ask if she would meet with us a delegation of people from the group. So we had someone from the Trades Council, someone from the Palestine Solidarity Committee, someone from the local mosque, someone from the trade union. So we had, quite a varied delegation. And she wrote back to us, and she entertained, we had a meeting with her a week before nominations went in. And at that meeting, we really wanted to know from her exactly where she stood in terms of being an advocate for left-wing policies, and particular on Palestine, obviously for sure, but then also on other issues, social issues such as child poverty issues, pensions, funding the NHS, etc., etc. And I think at that meeting it was very clear that she felt somewhat constrained by the current leadership in terms of what she could say and what she could do, which when we came back to our members and kind of relayed the kind of the tone of the meeting, it really wasn't kind of the advocate that we wanted in terms of an outspoken MP kind of representing our constituency. And so on the back of that meeting, we had an emergency meeting where we kind of made a decision. Well, what did we want to do, given the feedback we got from her from that meeting? And ultimately, the members decided that actually the best thing to do was to actually put up an independent challenge against her. And not because we didn't think of her personally, but obviously the fact that under Keir Starmer, she just doesn't have the ability to speak out, which is what we want from our MP. In Edmonton and Winchmore Hill, there is. I mean, obviously the Tories. It's quite interesting because the boundary changes has actually included quite a significant chunk of ex-Tory wards. So there'll be a bit of an uptick in terms of the Tory base, but then obviously there's a lot of base that they will lose on the back of 14 years of austerity. But there is a significant chunk. The real determining factor, or the real kind of unknown factor, is the Muslim vote in Edmonton and Winchmore Hill. In Edmonton and Winchmore Hill, there's about 22% of the electorate is Muslim. So that's bigger than Rochdale. I think it's number 19 on seats in the whole country in terms of how big the Muslim vote is. So the real determining factor really about where Edmonton and Winchmore Hill goes is really turnout. There's turnout of whether the Muslim community as a whole are actually engaged and actually, really feel what they want to say in terms of Palestine and on politics in general in terms of Labour. And then as well as non-Muslim voters who are frankly sick of the two-party duopoly and want to represent, a protest and want something different. So really, but the real reason we stood, was to give people a choice. Without a strong independent candidate, there really wouldn't have been a choice locally because, like you said, there really isn't a third party in Edmonton and Winchmore Hill. It's always been Labour and Tory. So we really want to give people a choice and say, look, you deserve to have an alternative choice at this election, and we're committed to give that to you. So that was really the driver to do that. The Enfield Community Action Group that we set up, ECAG, was designed to be non-political. So it wasn't politically affiliated with any political party. And we weren't religiously affiliated with any particular mosque, for example. So we were completely neutral. So when George Galloway won in Rochdale, and on the back of that, there was a real kind of wave of euphoria within the Workers' Party, wasn't there, when he won? And they were putting up, and they were inviting candidates to stand and to apply, pretty much from anywhere. I think I remember. So at the back of in April, I think it was around my birthday actually, which is why I remember it. We wrote to the General Secretary, to the Secretary of the Workers' Party, and we asked them, given that we weren't politically affiliated with any particular political group, whether they would come talk to us and engage with us in terms of what they wanted to do, because we knew by that time they were looking to stand candidates. So we reached out to them to say, can we have a discussion in terms of trying to pull together a unity candidate if they were going to stand, because at that time we hadn't selected any candidates of our own, so we were more than happy. And we also at the same time reached out to the Greens, so I previously reached out to the Green Party as well. So and in both cases we received no reply. We received no responses, and the election got called, and thereafter people started to reach out to us. I was like, well, the reality is that we had to move on and do what we wanted to do from our perspective. So I would have loved to have worked with the Workers' Party and the Greens to come up with some sort of unity candidate against Labour. Absolutely. But from what I've seen of the local candidate, they look very much like paper candidates. They've been asked to put up their own deposits. I don't know how much support they've been given in terms of central support or volunteers, but they seem very, very low on the ground, for example, in terms of what we've seen. So, are they going to take some votes away? For sure. Are we worried? Not necessarily, because we're building a base from the community upwards. We've taken the community with us, and so it is what it is. I mean, it's democracy after all. At the end of the day, if you want to stand, you're entitled to stand. I'm not going to stop you from standing. I would have loved to have that discussion, and we reached out, but it wasn't meant to be. So yeah, good luck to everyone. As I say to everyone, as long as you don't vote for Labour or the Tories, yeah, it's fine. But if you want to vote for workers, if you absolutely want to vote for the Workers' Party, then that's your choice. But please just don't vote for Labour or the Tories. I do. I mean, like I say, this has not been done in Enfield. This has not been done, and the fact that we're bringing together the Muslim community, we're bringing together trade unionists. We work with Tusk. So one of our candidates in Southgate Mill Green is a Tusk candidate, so a Socialist Party candidate, and we're building those community ties. And I think one of the things we've always said when we set up the action group is that we weren't going to expect to make huge waves very instantly. It was always about using this general election as a stepping stone for the local council elections in 2 years' time. That was always the plan. It wasn't meant to be that we were suddenly going to mount a challenge, because we just don't have the infrastructure. This election was about building the infrastructure, building the base, building the experience that people need, canvassing, outreach, just the whole kind of the back office things that need to be done to run a campaign. And so it was about building that kind of political muscle and to be able to then kind of go into a local election campaign where we've got more candidates that, we've got a base. We can show that, look, we've got X amount of votes in the election. We've now got a base. Standing as a local councillor candidate is not a strange thing to do, because there's plenty of support for you out there. So, and then obviously if you can get councillors into the council, then you've got potentially candidates who will stand in 5 years' time who have got experience. So for us, this was always a long-term goal and a long-term vision. This wasn't about standing up against Kate Osamor as a headline. This was about building the community and giving them a real choice, going forward, and really engaging youngsters. Ed, I mean, one of the real passions that I have is to increase the level of civic engagement that we have in amongst our youth in Edmonton. Really get them to understand that they can take part in local politics. It's not something that's for old, it's for a certain demographic or a certain class or a certain background. It is for you. If you live in the constituency and you experience the issues that you experience, then you absolutely have a right to take part in the political process. And I think when youngsters see that an independent movement can grow from scratch and from the ground up, that will hopefully infuse them and encourage them to take part, going forward. So for us, it's yes, there's a political element to this, but one of the reasons we called ourselves the Enfield Community Action Group is that we do see ourselves very much as part of the community, and building communities is part of our role. The first thing is to believe that their vote isn't wasted. That's the biggest. Whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim. So if you're a Muslim, you almost might think, well, what is the point? And we point to them, the statistics around the Muslim electorate, how much the Muslim community do not turn out to vote, do not register, to be on the electoral roll. So engaging, that community to get involved and show them that actually, if they did, they could have a huge impact. And then alternatively, on those who are apathetic to politics in general, as I said to you, I was just canvassing before the call, and when they find out that I've been a resident in Edmonton for over 45 years, and when I tell the people on doorstep, they say, "Oh, really?" And that's like, "Oh, yes." I went to local schools. I've stayed in the area. I haven't moved, and so they kind of understand that, this isn't just about politics. This is about our community, and the fact that the current political system hasn't served us well and hasn't served the constituency well. And they understand that actually, yes, that there is a different way, or there should be a different way of doing things. And trying to get that message across is really important to them. So those two factors are key, I think, in terms of engaging with the electorate, to say that actually your vote does matter and it isn't wasted, and you shouldn't just spoil your ballot paper or not turn up. You by voting independent, you actually can make you can make an impact, and it can make a huge strategic impact both for this election and for elections to come. So it's really our task is really about messaging and about awareness and about telling the constituency that there is a genuine challenge that they can take part in. I mean, obviously, if you speak to the Muslim community, the genocide is a big thing. I mean, one of our candidates in Enfield North has actually got a billboard now up, actually saying, end UK complicity to genocide in big letters, out there on the street. So, there is no there's no difficulty in talking about the genocide here. People are very open about it, and very clear about, that that's it. The issue that we have is that it's translating that anger into being able to then channel that anger into the political process, and saying to people, if you are angry and upset with what you're seeing on your screen, by ticking a box and not voting for Labour or Conservative can also help. And it's trying to get across that is part of the process. Going on demonstrations is part of the process. Giving in charity to charities helping Palestinians is part of the process. Advocating Palestinian causes is part of the process, as is voting for parties that are pro-Palestinian. And it's all part of the things that people need to do if they want to vent their anger and frustration. And it's trying to, as I said to you before, it's trying to build political muscle in Enfield. We just don't have that kind of. We're still, we're not even at the gym yet. My view is we're not even at the gym. We're trying to get to the gym. So it's going to take some time for us to really mobilize. But you've got to start somewhere. So people are angry, but we haven't got baying mobs of angry people with pitchforks at the Enfield Council, for example. We're not that radical in Enfield. We're not that. There are pockets, but generally people are. They'll just carry on and do their own thing. And so that's the challenge. Trying to deal with that kind of apathy or, the inertness is the difficulty. If you look at the stats in all of the Enfield seats, there hasn't been a third party challenge. I think the Greens got a maximum of about 3,000 votes last night. There's just an acceptance that it doesn't matter who you vote for. It's all the same. I hear it on the doorstep all the time. They're all the same. They're all the same. They're all the same. And I have a real challenge to say to them. Actually, I'm not Labour or Tory. I'm actually completely away from them. And I agree with you. But the moment you tell people that you're campaigning, they're like, they glaze over, and you can see like I'm not going to talk to you because it's politics, and I don't know anything to politics, and that is the challenge in Enfield in particular. The fact that people just don't think a third party can come through, and that's why we're standing to show to the electorate that there is a third party that can come through, and if we can make a big enough splash this time round, it will help us as we go into local elections, and then obviously the next general election challenge. So that's to say, that's why we're doing this, to build and to grow and mobilize from the ground up to give people real hope. Rubbish. And I mean, literally rubbish. I can't believe. I mean, if you live in Edmonton, you know about the problem that the council has with rubbish. It is something that people always talk about in Enfield. Just like we would talk about the weather, as Brits, it's that sort of thing. But the scale of what and obviously it's a council issue, it's not necessarily kind of a national, but the scale of real disenchantment with what the council are doing, what politicians are doing, just life in the constituency. It's quite striking how angry people are over local issues. It really is, and the dissatisfaction. So not just rubbish politicians, actual rubbish as well. The night before we made our decision on whether we should stand against Kate Osamor was the night that Faisal Shaheen next door in Chingford and Wood Green was deselected. So that played a huge part in our decision making process in terms of why we were going to stand against Kate. Not against, like I say, not because of Kate herself, but purely because of the party that she stands for. A lot of people are saying, look, how can you actually stand for a party that can deselect a candidate like Pfizer on the basis of a liking of a Green Party tweet or whatever it was, or it's just that level of authoritarianism is just unheard of, really. So and it isn't. We need to stand up, and the amount of barrage I've heard about Nigel Farage and what he talks about Muslims and the stuff that he gets away with. Talking about Muslims is just incredible, and this is the level of political discourse that we're having to deal with. And even myself is like standing seems to be some sort of extremist act. Standing for parliament is some sort of extremist act. If you're a Muslim, any other person is perfectly democratic, but if you're Muslim and standing, then then somehow you're trying to erode British values, which is ridiculous, because surely standing for parliament is exactly the epitome of British values, is it not? Is it not? So it really is quite worrying, in terms of the level of discourse that's currently out there. But that's why that's what we're doing to challenge those kind of stereotypes and those tropes. It almost feels like that there's cover. He's given them diplomatic cover, the NEC, to give them cover to actually be able to say things and do things, and not have them taken for it. I mean, if you look at Diane Abbott's whole appeal process, I mean, that was clouded in secrecy. Did they know who when was the decision made? It was just complete ridiculousness in terms of no transparency in terms of that whole process. And look, Kate got suspended. Pfizer. I mean, there's a similarity, isn't there? I mean, they're female, they're non-white. They're left wing. I mean, the pattern slowly grows, doesn't it? So you can see what's happening, and so Labour should be as I say this on my kind of campaign material. Labour should be the home of the oppressed. They should be the home of people who are vulnerable. Those who've got no voice for. And unfortunately, Labour have left those people and deserted those people. Unfortunately, and that's why there's a huge amount of independent challenge. I mean, I think it's 461 candidates, isn't it? 461 independent candidates are standing at the election as independents. So it's a huge number. And that has to have a reflection. That's a reflection of the mainstream parties. That is clearly a reflection of the mainstream parties. So we work with Transform just like we work with the Muslim Vote and work with Collective. So, like I said, we're not affiliated, but Transform have endorsed all our candidates. Have endorsed myself. Collective have endorsed myself as well. The only endorsement, so two of the candidates in Enfield have been endorsed by the Muslim Vote. Unfortunately, I did not get the Muslim Vote endorsement because of the ongoing issues that the Muslim Vote had with supporting Labour candidates. Now, I don't think they've made a decision yet as to whether they're going to endorse Kate or not, but it's up in the air around that. But that's something the Muslim Vote have to sort out themselves. But I haven't got the TMV nomination on the back of the fact that Kate's obviously supported the ceasefire. I've had discussions with the Muslim Vote, and I made it very clear to them that I would go with the community. I was under strong pressure to not stand up against Kate, but the community were very clear. The community were very clear once we had the discussion with her. And we could see that she was constrained by Keir Starmer and the Labour leadership. It was very clear that the community wanted to challenge, and that was not. I don't think that was news that the TMV wanted to hear. But that's for me as founder of the action group, I clearly have to go with my community. Literally, we went through all different options. So, for example, we just said, like, should we not stand? Should we kind of stand but don't give her our endorsement? Oh, sorry, should we not stand but don't give her our endorsement? Should we back, a Workers' Party candidate or else? And eventually all of those options were taken off the table, and the community said, that we wanted the candidate. Now, the reality was we didn't have a candidate, Ed. Let's be honest, because the election was called, and so it was very much last resort in terms of it was either stand or we didn't have someone to stand up against it in terms of the timetable. So and like I said, I was as the last resort, I was happy to take that role because of all those issues I just talked to you about in terms of building for the future, building for local councils. If we hadn't stood in this election, we would have lost all this learning that we're kind of going through, in terms of building for the future. So, for us, it would have been detrimental had we not stood against her. The clear message that we're saying is that you have a voice now. We're selling to our voters. You don't have to choose the lesser of two evils. There's so many people who are saying, "Oh, well, I don't want to vote Labour, but I don't want the Tories in." I think it's very clear now that the Tories are not going to win the election. I think it's very clear that Tories are probably not even going to be the largest party, in Parliament. So not voting for Labour is not going to enable a Tory government. And I think trying to get that message that you can vote for your conscience, you can vote for a candidate you actually believe in. That's the democratic process. I hate this concept of voting lesser evil. I absolutely loathe it. That you have to choose, lesser of two evils. You don't really want to vote for it, but they're better than the other lot. It's absolutely terrible. It isn't what democracy should be about. Democracy should be about picking and choosing a candidate, casting your vote for someone you believe in, or a party in whose policies you believe in, and you want to vote positively, not some sort of tactical or some sort of negative vote. That's what I want to kind of have the people of Edmonton and Winchmore Hill understand that they can do that now. We're giving them that choice. They don't have to spoil their ballot paper or not turn up. If they truly want something, better than the existing mainstream parties, they've got that choice and they can use it. It's always been a wide mix. So we've got people obviously from the Muslim community, from the mosques, but then also we've got people from the local community, from from community action groups, other community groups like food bank groups, etc. The socialists are there, obviously the Socialist Party are there as well in terms of that mixture. We've got people from the Enfield Trades Council as well on that kind of group. So it is a mixture of people across Enfield. So it isn't kind of one particular demographic, it isn't one particular ethnic group. It is a very widespread, which I love, which I have to say, it's the most enjoyable part of my role, is actually bringing the community together, because without this political kind of will that we've got, you wouldn't meet people in your constituency, and so one of the real benefits that I personally have gained from this is just meeting people from my area, who I would have never met in other forms. And so it really is, I really can't stress how important it is that we share these spaces that we live in, and yet we don't necessarily engage with people, that share our spaces. And I think this whole process for us has really pulled us together as a community. And so it's wonderful. It was Eid yesterday, and we were all leafleting. So Muslim, non-Muslim, we're all outside the mosques, leafleting for our candidates. It's fantastic. It was really, really, it's a real pleasure to see, the community come together, for a united cause, and that's something that we should certainly look to seek to continue after the election, and make sure we don't lose that sense of community that we have between us. It is hard, and like I said, and the fact that we're not, we don't carry pitchforks with us, and we're not radical in Enfield, and so it's hard. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to get people at meetings. You tell, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, it's hard to get people engaged, but I think that I've got this advantage of being from the community, that having lived in Enfield for so long, that I've met so many different people whilst I've lived in Enfield, in Edmonton. And so I've got this natural advantage of being able to kind of, bring people from different parts of the community together. And I think, having more people who have, engaged and interacted with other parts of the community really does help, and that's where I really hope for us to grow, in terms of, the more we interact with each other. You talked about racism and discrimination, ultimately that is the cure. That is the cure against any sort of discrimination, by actually being amongst people who don't look the same as you, who don't come from the same place as you, but you're kind of working together with a common goal. And that really does defeat those who want to divide us. Ultimately, we want to bring the community together. We don't want any sort of divisiveness within us. Best, yeah. So the best thing about what I live, it's home. All I can say to you is home. I've lived in my home. I mean, I was a brief period where I worked abroad for a while, but I still live in the constituency. My parents are still in the constituency. I've still got family in the constituency. I know people. I go to the local supermarket. I recognize the people there. I recognize the people from the mosques. It's community. It's home. That's for me, it's the best thing. I could easily move away from Enfield, but I've never done it because it is home to me. And I think, whilst people do move on and go to other places, I think, there is a place for people to, live in a certain area for a good amount of time, because they can. And, we won't talk about the fact that sometimes people are priced out of their local area because of house prices. So that's a completely different issue. But, for me, that sense of community is exactly what, that sense of community when I had when I was growing up in Edmonton, I appreciate times are different, but that for me is what this is about. Yeah. Well, the thing I would say is that it's not easy. I'm not going to say it's been all like birds singing and swooning and say it's tough. It is absolutely tough. Like I'm sure like lots of other independent candidates, I'm not getting any sleep, or 2 hours worth of sleep. It is not easy, but like I said, I think the goal is to bring the community together. The goal is to give people a positive choice and to do something different because we can for once. There is this kind of, the whole movement around independence, and that's taken us. We're riding that wave here in Edmonton and Enfield, just like, many events across the country. And I think, this is our moment and we would be mad not to have kind of taken hold of that moment and go with it. So I'm really happy that, I canvassed with Leanne in Ilford North. So I've been on canvassing sessions from the beginning. Obviously, I had to apologise to her and say, look, I've probably got my hands full now, so I'm not going to give it as much time as I used to. But I've out been campaigning with Leanne. I know Andrew Feinstein in Holborn, as well. And so, all of us together, I say Pfizer in Chingford. So all of us together are trying to aim for the same thing. And I hope we can all support each other, obviously during this election campaign, but then thereafter we can also, as an independent movement, kind of come together and then we'll see what happens and how we land, our post general election.